No problem. Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Would ask for the roll to be called, please.
Bergson? Harper? Petrie? Schrader? Weibel? And Esri.
Here. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Schrader. Any other additions or anything to be done? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you. Move on then, approval of minutes for the ELEC committee meeting, April 7th, 2016. Is there a motion? Moved Ms. Petrie, seconded Ms. Bergson. Any corrections to be made or additions as they were presented? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. Then move on to public participation. We have one person slip. Try and limit it if you can to around 5 minutes. I mean, being the only one, that's in general what we rule, but can give you a little leeway if need be. But we have Jermaine Light, and would ask, yes, please take a seat, and the button in the lowest middle, if you push it, or like Ms. Monty can help you with that. Yep, it's on.
Testing.
Thank you. And also ask if you'd please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jermaine Light, L-I-G-H-T, like Let There Be Light, and my address is 2402 North High Cross Road, Urbana. So I do have a flyer, a two-page front and back flyer. Would you like a copy of it? Or I know I'm not supposed to ask you questions. Do I have permission to pass it out, or can?
That's fine, you can pass it.
All right. Thank you. Well, I am a member of a group that probably doesn't have an official name yet, but we're, for lack of anything better, I'll just call it the Middle Fork Coal Ash Group. We have some members in Champaign County and some members in Vermilion County. And the leaders of the group are Pam and Lan Richard, who couldn't be here tonight. But thank you very much. When we saw, sure. And if you want extras, I do have extras here. When we saw that you had this on your agenda, we were delighted and wanted to make sure you knew that we are here and that we could provide you with information to help you make any decisions you might want to make on this issue. And I suppose what is going through your mind is the same thing that's going through ours, is that even though this problem is actually happening in Vermilion County, it is a place that many Champaign County citizens utilize for recreation, and it is probably has some things to offer that maybe Champaign County doesn't have in the way of having a national scenic river, namely the Middle Fork. Now, the Middle Fork River it's actually the Middle Fork of the Vermilion River, technically. It does go through Champaign County in the northeast corner of the county, as you know, and we have a county forest preserve there. That's part of our Champaign County Park System, but I don't believe that part has been designated National Scenic River. It's further downriver where it passes through Vermilion and goes through Kickapoo State Park, and before that it goes through Kennecott, and in that area is where it's designated National Scenic River. It's also a state scenic river. It's the only one in Illinois that's national and state, either one. So that's very special, is that it is that, and the only one in the state as well. It's also a more rugged terrain, a little wilder feeling over in that area than I think really any place in Champaign County has. It's the only place that I know of, correct me if I'm wrong, the only place that has a canoe concession, I believe. And that's nice for people who don't have canoes that want a canoe. So just as a sort of a background. Now, what's happened is that, and some of this is on the flyer and some of this may not be, but there was, I believe that Illinois Power Company did originally own this power plant, and Dynegy, a different company, came in and bought it, and I can't give you exact dates, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare that, but I want to say 80s, but that could be totally wrong, so just ignore that. But at any rate, fairly recently, they bought it, and they ran it for a while, and then they closed it. And they knew full well when they bought it that it had problems, environmental pollution problems with their coal ash waste that needed to be fixed, okay? So they bought it with full knowledge of this. And then when they closed the plant, they wanted to, you know, close it off and just move out and leave it and leave the problem to the community. But they didn't really fix what they should have fixed. So basically, and this is a very quick, since I only have less than 5 minutes now, summary of what happened is that the EPA has informed them of violations. One of them being, for example, that they didn't put proper liners, or that, you know, whoever made it originally didn't put proper liners underneath. And there are big concerns as well that with a really, really big flood of the Middle Fork, that some of these waste areas might be eroded very, very badly. They are already leaking, and that's some of the violation right there. You can actually visually see it when you canoe down the river. You can actually see where they've tried to shore up the bank of the river to keep it from eroding, because they're afraid that the waste is going to get worse, that the pollution is going to get worse. But you can see the stuff dripping down into the river. It's all these weird colors that you don't see anywhere else on the river, coming right down there. And you can see where they've tried to shore it up with wire, kind of, it's like a real super strong hardware cloth, but it's like really, really strong. But it's like been bent by floods, and, you know, it's kind of sagging in places and stuff. And they built, either they or Illinois Power Company built these, I'm not sure which, I'll be honest, built these waste deposits, and they're shown here on the flyer on the page that says Dynegy has a coal ash problem at the top. And it shows you the old North Ash Pond, and the old East Ash Pond, and the new East Ash Pond. I believe the new East Ash Pond has better characteristics, you might say. Somewhat of a liner, perhaps. But the old ones are really, really bad. And they've all been put too close to the river. They're all three in the floodplain. And what we're really hoping is that the EPA will make them move it, or that the public pressure, I think that is what we're going to have now, is public pressure will make them move it back away from the river, up off the floodplain, but still on Dynegy property, and just move it all. What we do not want is for them to move this coal ash to the landfill over by Clinton. We don't want that. We don't want this, you know, mean more stuff, more of a problem. You know, we want it just moved away from the Middle Fork with proper liners and caps. Now, when the EPA notified them of their violations, and I may not get all the language correct here exactly, Dynegy submitted a corrective kind of proposal of what they would do. And basically, they just want to put an earthen cap on top, leave them where they are, put an earthen cap on top of them, which in our minds, you know, could be swept away in a flood, perhaps. And that's it. You know, wash their hands. There might be some other details to it, but basically wash their hands of this. And we're waiting to see what I should have said the Illinois EPA instead of just EPA. We're waiting to see what the Illinois EPA then will respond to this proposal of theirs. We don't know yet how they will view this or what they will say. So we're telling you what we hope, but we do think that public pressure would be good here. Now, there are people in Vermilion County working on this too. For example, they have a Chamber of Commerce, and I forgot what it's called. It has a kind of a different name, but it is their Chamber of Commerce. And they're very concerned about this right now. They've had a presentation from our group, a slideshow and a video and a talk by our leaders, which, by the way, you folks could have if you request it. We would be glad to do that for you. And they are so concerned that they're writing letters to they've made a resolution, they're writing letters to the governor and legislators and EPA, and they're trying to put some public pressure on Dynegy to do the right thing, not just whatever the IEPA tells them, but even to go further than that, perhaps, we hope, depending on what IEPA does tell them. And they're, of course, looking at a riverfront development, since the Vermilion, well, after, downriver from this Dynegy plant, the Middle Fork flows into the Salt Fork, and then the Salt Fork and the Middle Fork together flow with the, well, the North Fork flows into them, and then it's called the Big Vermilion after that, or just plain Vermilion. And right about where the North Fork is and the Middle Fork and the North Fork come together, they're trying to have a riverfront development of some kind. They have a park there already, and they want to develop it better, and I don't know exactly what they have planned, but they're very concerned that this could mess it up if some bad waste gets in there. And we can also, part of our longer presentation tells about what happened in Tennessee and some other places where similar coal ash things like this got out into the environment and ruined, just acres and acres. It just goes way, way downstream. Another thing that you could do, we would be very happy to have you and anyone in the public as guests, is on May 25th, we are going to do a presentation at the Kickapoo Landing. If you're not quite sure what that is, that's the canoe concession, and it's also a little restaurant in Kickapoo State Park where they rent the canoes, but they also have snacks and hamburgers and stuff, and they also have bands a couple nights a week in the summertime. They are very concerned about this problem too. They don't want their canoeists and inner tubists to get poisoned, as well as they don't know a lot of people fish there, and they don't want people fishing to eat the fish and get poisoned. And so they are cooperating and letting us use their facilities. So May 25th at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a long program with video slides taken from the canoeing. Some people will probably canoe before the program starts to take a look at it. So if you want to come to that, you're quite welcome. So I know I'm not supposed to ask you any questions, but if you want to ask me or...
Well, stick around if you wish.
I
It's
will.
fairly early on and we can, it's typically more to have interaction then. So stick around if you wish, and we'll see if we have any other questions for you then.
Well, thank you very much for letting me talk. And
Thank you.
I hope I covered the most important things.
Okay, we will then move on to communications. I guess the only thing I will mention is I believe everyone here of the board anyway, and Rick and Brian and maybe Susan even, is that Sam, plans changed obviously, so his resignation became effective basically, you could say, yesterday morning. So that's why we do not have Sam here, and his name and nameplate aren't there. Just a quick communication from me. Is there anything else from any of the other members? Okay, then we'll move on to section 7 for information only. We have another update regarding assistance to Wilbur Heights subdivision, and Ms. Monty.
Okay, as you may have read in the notes, I have about 4 points to make about the Wilbur Heights project. One is an update with regard to the overall timeline for grants and applications for Community Development Assistance Program grants, and our date of submission, August 16th, 2016, will not be feasible for this year to meet, primarily due to a new limitation that was shared with us about 2 weeks ago, and that is that the design of construction documents will not be possible to include in the grant portion of the 75% that we're asking for grant monies to cover. So that threw in a whole layer of challenges. So that's that update there. So also I learned from IDOT that they are sitting on the jurisdictional transfer of funds. They're aware of the potential interest here in Champaign County by Summer Township and or City of Champaign to acquire jurisdiction of Wilbur Avenue. So they are sitting on that and will do so for the time being. There's no danger of that going away. That was good news. So, and then we have information from the Burns Clancy and Associates with regard to potentially combining phases 1A and 1B. Now, those are the phases of drainage improvements along Wilbur Avenue and reconstruction of Wilbur Avenue. So we had information from them for an estimate to potentially use before we found out the grant deadline would prohibit submission of that type of thing during 2016. That we subsequently discussed with the Champaign County Highway Engineer, and we had a pretty productive meeting just strategizing ways forward and essentially scaling back the stages of this to encompass simply a focus on improvements along Wilbur Avenue and the reconstruction of Wilbur Avenue initially. Now that these are just discussions at a staff level, and I think it's a good idea to consider that only because this is a very complicated project, and the more we can keep it simple and straightforward, the better the residents and businesses will understand what we're trying to do, and the easier it will be to try to request funding for pieces of it if it's not tried to be done all in one swoop. So what else can I say? There's Wilbur Avenue and drainage improvements along Wilbur Avenue that we will next meet with Summer Township, City of Champaign, highway engineer from the county, and have additional discussions about that moving forward and taking what we need to consider into consideration for a grant application to cover that simplified kind of scope, and then developing a detailed timeline that's feasible and bringing this all back to you for your review. Now, I didn't talk anything about or give you any kind of summary about the survey results, and that's a pretty important thing to consider. Essentially, in March, we sent out a survey to residents, landowners, businesses of Wilbur Heights to ask them 4 primary questions. And just to summarize the results, we sent out 81 questionnaires to landowners and businesses, and received a 32% response rate. And I'll just summarize. Question 2 was with regard to whether or not they'd be willing to provide their fair share, which was an estimate we provided in our newsletters to them, of a 20-year kind of payback schedule based on the amount of impervious surface area of each type of property, categorized generally, just a broad estimate of what that might be. And so now we got back responses, as I mentioned, 25, an additional one since I did this compilation. So 7 said yes, they'd be willing to do that, 16 said no, and then there were 2 undecided or no response kind of responses. So just about half said, or more, no, we would not be willing. So then the next question was, well, if you said no to question 2, then what would you be willing to do? And so we got these kinds of responses. We got approximately 6 that gave an amount ranging from $18 to $6 a month, with 4 indicating $6 a month. 13 no responses, and then 2 just plain out no. So those were sort of the spread on that question. So question 4 then was specific to, would you be willing to pay extra to have a paved parking spot located within the public right-of-way in front of your property? And so essentially an overwhelming no from the 25 respondents. 22 said no, 2 said yes, and 1 did not respond or said not applicable. So then the final question of note was question 5, and that question was with regard to whether the county should try to realize a cost savings of approximately $318,000 to just not include in the drainage improvements the under drains that were recommended by Burns, Clancy and Associates. And so of the 25 that responded, I believe 6 said no, go with the improve with the under drains, and 11 said yes, the county should save money, and then the remainders were a no response. So this, and then I included all of the comments received, and if you have a chance to read those, you'll see there's a lot of still misunderstandings out there, and sort of blaming going on, and just comments like that. So, with a few, one little bright spot that said, yes, I want to do all I can to help. It's a little bright spot there in those comments. So, part of what we were talking about with Jeff Blue earlier this week was to do another survey once we get the timeline of the modified type of Phase 1 scope to just those residents, and just take this piece by piece. But I don't want to say that that's any kind of definite thing, because you haven't been presented with it yet, and you ultimately will make the recommendation about how to proceed forward. So that's, in a nutshell, the status of the Wilbur Heights project. We want to keep it alive, we want to seek funding, and we want to keep it simple and identify funding sources before we move too far ahead.
Thank you, Susan. Questions? Ms. Petrie?
Susan, as usual, thank you very much. I do have a number of questions. Those who said it was a rather high number for the number of respondents who said they would not be interested in paying to have additional parking area, did they thoroughly understand that what they had filled in the ditches would be cleaned out and they wouldn't have that parking area that they presently are using now?
It's hard to know which of the 25 persons responded who attended the community meetings or read the newsletter. So,
Oh, so that was not a question on the
Right.
survey, whether they
she
had
said,
attended or
why?
not.
Why are you saying no?
Yeah, okay. Well, I wonder about that, because that certainly is one of the problems there. Second is, can you, or do you plan to do at the next meeting, update us on this new sort of abbreviated approach, so we can have a better idea of what that means as compared to what you've talked about?
Yes, I'd
before?
be happy to, and I feel relieved just thinking about it in simpler terms, because I was wondering how to structure a special assessment project
Okay.
otherwise, and it just seems doable now, more doable.
Okay, and then my last question is a little bit probably longer answer, and it refers to basically the first full set of paragraphs on page 6. And could you help us understand this hiccup in being able to get a design done so that you could apply for this grant that's mentioned?
Right.
Or the assistance program, I should say.
Right.
The
For the
correct
community
terminology.
development assistance application or
Yeah,
program grant.
right.
Essentially, they do not fund design anymore, so when we do go forward with an application to the CDAP program, to get full points, the design will have to be already done, and the application will need to even also contain a construction permit from Illinois EPA. So we need to
So-
be further along down the road before we can apply for a community development assistance program, since they are no longer funding design.
Okay, so the major barrier is amount of money to get somebody to do the design to be part of this submission? Do I understand correctly?
Well, it's a factor, a definite primary factor under consideration, how to fund that design.
So if there were money available to get a design done, then is there enough time to put together the rest of the paperwork so it could be submitted?
By August 16th?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say that, or imagine that's feasible.
Okay, what additional help would you need to make that deadline?
Immediate money, and
Immediate money for what?
I would need to understand if any kind of special procedures need to be followed for bidding and obtaining that design. And I got sort of different information that I'm working with, so I need to hone in on that. I heard that no, and then I heard that yes. So
And you heard those answers from what entity?
Well, during our discussions, so I haven't had time to follow up. We just had these discussions on Tuesday, so. Yeah, so you'd be interested in knowing the obstacles to an August 16th?
Well, if there were some things that might facilitate this, even though we might have to find some money, but if you look at that related to the return rate on assistance on this project, and the biggest hurdle is money to do the project.
Right, and time to apply for IEPA permits, that's like going into a black void.
Okay, and then my last question is this a one-shot chance, or does this chance roll through every 6 months, annually, what?
Well, I have information that there's only one cycle this year from the Community Development Assistance Program, but I would
So-
assume the next,
Cycle would be a year hence.
well, it'd be sooner without all the delay that they had this year. So perhaps July 1st of 2017.
Okay, and what approximately is the amount of grant money or the range of grant money that we're talking about here?
For that CDAP application, it would be limited to $450,000 to cover 75% of the construction cost only, not the design.
No, I understand that, but that is a significantly important return rate,
Yeah.
potentially. Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none?
Well,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
John, is this some information that, Susan would have to get this information to Sweet so we could see if anything could be done to help her. Is there reason to try to do that, or do you agree that it's something beyond the possibility?
Yeah, I think trying to get something to CDAP by August of this year is just, I don't even think we should try that. I think we're trying to regroup now and get a timeline established for the next CDAP application window, which, as Susan said, is July 1, 2017. I think that's the only realistic option at this point.
I'd be happy to just spend about another hour looking at any kind of feasible way forward for August 16th, but I'm not very hopeful.
Oh, well, if you think you can do something in an hour, I think it would be worthwhile, so we could, you might be able to work with John and Rick and see what potentials are out there. A whole year away concerns me in moving this project forward. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, we will move on then to, thank you, Susan, on that one. Move on then to B, the update regarding the work plan for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, MPDES, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4, Stormwater Discharge Permit for the remainder of 2017 and for 2018. Mr. Hall.
Yeah, actually, I should say for the remainder of 2016 and 2017, sorry about that. I don't need any approvals from the committee on this, but I just wanted to make you aware that we have some significant deadlines we have to meet this year in the MS4 program. These were deadlines that we had set for ourselves in previous years, and the EPA finally wants us to meet these deadlines. So, for example, the intern hours, which generally we have used for enforcement and inspections, those will all go towards the MS4 program this year for the remainder of this year. I've asked Susan to shift all of her hours that were for the MS4 annual update to working on this storm sewer system map. I would like to have all of the general planning assistance hours that are left in the contract, that's about 140 hours, available for the MS4 program so we can make sure we meet our deadline for this year. And then this will also affect the work plans for the next couple of years. But mainly this year, we have to get something done on the storm sewer system map. And I will also be working with the state's attorney's office to bring to the committee later this year an amendment for the nuisance ordinance regarding illicit discharges. These are things that we had already said we would get done this year, and we can expect that if we don't get those done this year, we'll have another non-advisory compliance letter from the EPA, perhaps. So we're taking it, you know, we have to get more involved on this MS4 program. And for example, on this Wilbur Heights thing, I will have no time this summer to spend on any expedited reviews of Wilbur Heights, because Wilbur Heights is something I hope we can do. The MS4 program is something we have to do if we don't want to get into more trouble with the EPA. So that's just a brief update now. Later on the agenda, you have the annual facility report that's in front of you. I didn't even have time to get that ready for the mailing, and we can talk about this more for that agenda item. And if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, questions, Ms. Petrie? Ms. Petrie.
Well, to share with the others on ELUC, I had an exploratory conversation with John because this came up at the last meeting in relationship to the obligation on the MS4. It's sort of like the ADA. We can't run away from it. And it, based on John's assessment, which I thoroughly accept, will consume and knock aside any other possibilities of work within his office. So I posited with him that maybe we could look at how can we set this up in a contract format so that this is very contained. The criteria are very contained. It isn't something that moves around. And maybe if you look at the time taken away from all the other things that need to be done in relationship to cost factor, to consult this out, it might be something worth having a conversation about. Then John shared with me what McLean County does, and McLean County totally contracts this out. None of these issues go through their Office of Planning and Zoning, or however it's titled in McLean County. It just automatically goes through the firm that they use. So then my next question to John was, since that already exists, maybe there is some IGA or some MOU that we could develop between ourselves and McLean County. And then as I was sharing some of my thoughts with Mr. Schrader, he pointed out that we might just have some individuals right here in our own community with whom we could be working on this. So it would be useful to hear from others if they are interested in seeing if we can help take some of the pressure off of John and just consuming all of the time virtually for the next 18 months on this. So that he and his office can work on the other things that do flow through that office.
Thank you, Patsy. Any comments or related to that, or other questions, comments on the MS4 at this point in time? There's no doubt that we would be looking for some money to pay for the if we were able to work something out, but it still might be worthwhile. I know money's tight, but
Money is tight, but we don't
you could,
know what the cost for
yeah,
money is tight, there's no question about that. We
Yeah.
all know that, but we don't know what the
exactly.
cost variable is. Cost variable may kick the idea right away.
exactly.
But I just think that we ought to have that information before we say there's no other possible avenues for John and his office.
Mr. Schrader?
Well, since my name was brought up. Yes, you did. And that's just fine. If you wanted to do it behind me, that's fine too. I don't really care. But anyway, I just think that Mr. Hall should be given some leverage and some support, at least from this board, that if whatever he thinks he needs, I think we should be at least willing to hear and listen to in support of this extra workload that he basically got thrown on top of him. He's covered up above his head, and I think it's just beyond his call of duty here. So I would not be opposed if he needs extra help. Whatever he thinks, I don't want to tell him what he needs, but if he needs extra help, I'm supportive of whatever he thinks he would like to have, if it's feasible with the rest of the board. But I'm supportive of it because I just think it's really unfair that I know it's his job, and he's more than happy to do it, and he won't complain, doggone it. But I think I'm supportive and want him to know that if he needs extra help.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this point in time? Seeing none, then we will move on to C, letter and draft for the county board resolution regarding electronics collections. And I'll just preface this a little bit by saying the idea was to kind of maybe take a straw poll here, see if we want to do something like this, and then if we do, we would then present it to go through the policy committee at Cal next week. And then I'll also just throw in, I don't know that it's necessarily urgent that it happened today or this month if we wanted to, sit on it for another month or something. But I'll just throw those out there and then let Ms. Monty speak to it.
Hi, well, this letter is provided because it's sort of a holding letter while behind-the-scenes negotiations go on to identify a solution and assign a House bill or a Senate bill number to that solution. Right now, there's no bill out there. There's just shell bills, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiations going on. So we intend to hear a lot of pushback at the collection coming up on May 21st, and by then, I hope we have a bill number. And I intend to provide this letter template to everyone who participates there so that they can know that there's actions they can take, and it's not in the hands of the county or the municipalities that put together these collections. So, yeah, I hope to have a House bill number before the end of May. That's what I've been hearing. But for now, this is a template and a draft resolution for the board's consideration. The letter template would be for your own personal use, to encourage your representatives to support any kind of solution.
Thank you. Questions, comments on it? Mr. Weibel?
Well, that's a good idea, but my concern is that the General Assembly is going to be going into recess pretty soon, end of the month. And if they don't have an actual bill by this time, I suspect it's not going to go anywhere if they do get one to come together. And if we can send out a resolution from the county board, I'd like to see it, to specify a bill, a specific bill.
Right.
Otherwise, it's sort of like a rah-rah letter, and
Right.
it'll get tossed aside. So I think
there
we
are
should wait
some-
until we have an actual bill.
I understand.
Ms. Petrie?
You said you expect to get pushback during the day of recycling. What kind of pushback are you anticipating?
Well, essentially angry people. So this is always good to say, here, you can do this. And yes, I would maybe suggest that if a House bill or a Senate bill becomes available prior to the committee of the whole meeting, then to make that known, possibly as an option to consider this resolution then. Oh, but you'd have to read it before you support it, of course.
Yeah, but just a clarification. I understand Pius's point perfectly, but does that preclude, in people's judgment or direction, just having this letter ready for you to hand out at that time?
Well, I'm not really asking for permission to hand it out. It's just a letter that's provided, but maybe I do need permission to hand it out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm just looking for clarification
Yeah.
here. Do we need something in formal approval for her to do this?
Well, I don't think I want to sanction, I think the county board should sanction this. I think you can do it on your own if you want to. I see nothing wrong
Yeah,
with that.
there's no-
I mean,
there's
Unless
no-
Mr. Hall has like something, a problem with it,
No,
then I think
okay.
this should not be concern of us.
Yeah, it's just,
Okay.
I'll just say I concur. I don't see why handing this letter out at the events.
Is it my understanding that if I get in line with my big old fat TV, that I should be angry when I give it to you? Was that better?
well, if we fill up the 8 semis and it's like 5 minutes to 12, then you might have a reaction.
I'm not, do you want me to be angrier? Is it better if I'm angry or not?
I think it's good to have a reaction and not
Okay,
be,
actually, at least a reaction. Okay, all right, thank you.
So I guess I'd mentioned the thought was maybe take a straw poll. Do we want to, is there a thought to maybe just hang on to this at this point in time? Is that, we can just kind of do that by consensus? I mean,
Yeah,
if
that's
that's the
fine.
general consensus right now, but keep in mind that sounds like if we do get a specific bill or something
Then
and
let's
present it
revisit
with
it.
that and revisit it then. Okay, sounds good. Thank you,
Thank
all.
you.
Then we'll move on now then to the 7D, Middle Fork campaign to protect the Middle Fork from coal ash pollution, which our public participator, Ms. Light, filled us in on. Ms. Monty, do you have anything else or whatever else you want to fill us
Well,
in on?
This was intended as an information-only item, and here you have all of the links that you see about the general information about the US EPA regulations that were effective last October regarding disposal of coal ash. It's sort of an informative page from Prairie Rivers. A link to the online video prepared by the Eco Justice Collaborative with regard to coal ash over on the Middle Fork of the Vermilion River, and a fact sheet that you have received tonight.
Okay, thanks. Is there questions or comments at this point in time? And I believe Ms. Light indicated she would be willing to answer any other questions we had too, if she is still willing. Ms. Petrie?
Just a couple of points of information for guidance for the chair in case there's a discussion about moving forward with a resolution of support. I heard you mention that. Have other communities step forward to do that, or you're just in the throes of informing communities concerning where you all are at with your campaign?
Yes, we're kind of just starting. I mean, we've been working on it some for a couple months or so, but we're, I don't know that the Vermilion County Board is doing any specifics right now, but we're working on them and getting in contact with the right people. We started out with a group more from Champaign County and didn't have the contacts at first in Vermilion County, but we're working on that. And we managed somehow to land with like I said, their Chamber of Commerce first somehow. And we've also talked to, and of course, they're the ones we know that they're definitely doing something on this already. They've already sent letters to the governor and so forth. I don't know if the county board is also working on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because I'm sure they want what's best for their business. And the Kickapoo, John, I can't remember his name, the director or site superintendent of the Kickapoo State Park, has been highly involved in meetings about this with the Army Corps of Engineers and Dynegy and the Illinois EPA, and trying to come up with some solutions, So that's all I know about Vermilion County. So we're in the process of trying to reach the right people there.
Would you mind, as you gather a bit of this information, to convey it to the chair so that he then, if he chooses to bring things forward for a resolution or something like that, then we'll have all the information?
Absolutely.
Thank
So,
you very
Mr.
much.
Esri,
Yes.
okay, just give me your contact info and I'll be glad to do that.
Email and or phone, or just email?
Whatever you want.
Email would just be ALE7496@yahoo.com. That's probably the easiest way. I'm pretty
Just
good.
make sure I got
Yeah.
this, ALE7496@yahoo.com?
Yep.
Okay, and do you want to give me your phone number too, or no?
It's on the website.
Okay, okay.
So I mean, but it's 217-552-6470.
552-6470. Thank you.
Like I say, it's nothing that's not already out there.
Yes. And, and I didn't exactly connect those dots when I did my public participation, but you read me right, Patsy. We were hoping that you would do a resolution in support of what folks are trying to do in Vermilion County for more public pressure.
Right, and so if you provide us with some of that information as it gets discussed, then at the choosing of the chair, it might get wound into how a resolution is prepared.
Good thinking. We'll be right there.
Any other, Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to pose a question to Ms. Light. I don't know if you would know the answer to this or not, but it's my understanding that coal ash is a recyclable material. It can be used, I think, as a concrete additive. I just wondered if you had heard anything in the discussion about that possibility.
I am not real knowledgeable about that. I had heard something about that too. Not with this group I've been working with, but somewhere else. I forgot where. But at any rate, yeah, I have heard of that, and it's a little bit of a controversy. It's a little controversial now. Though when they first started doing it, it wasn't as controversial. But this flyer does tell you some of the really bad things that are in it, including lead, mercury, cadmium, stuff you don't want to be messing around with. So that's all I can tell you. I can look into that and see if I can find out more about it, the possible, ways to recycle it. But until we know that there is a really safe way to deal with that pollution, we want it capped and lined properly and away from that river. So a 100-year flood wouldn't, break those ash ponds and break their sides and make that flow into the river. Because if just, a little tiny bit, if even 1% of that, what's stored there, got into the river, it could go as far as 70 miles. I mean, there was a really, really bad accident in Tennessee where that happened. And it was the amount was just about 1% of what is stored here at the Middle Fork, so. That's about the extent of my knowledge, sorry.
Mr. Weibel?
Well, actually, the Illinois State Geological Survey had some people working on finding a use for coal ash, and it can be used as an additive in I think both bricks and in concrete block, but it's just an additive. But the problem is, of course, you get whatever is in the coal ash in your brick or block. And also, I suspect that if they were going to do that, they'll use it from a relatively fresh source and not from something that's been in the ground for a while. So I suspect that's really not an outlet for this type of material.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Schrader?
Well, your county highway department uses a form of it in the emulsifant for sealing some of our county roads. So it is used by this county. And I know it is being used too in some asphalt mixes for highways and roads, so to answer your question.
There is a lot of coal ash out there, though.
Any other questions while we have Ms. Light so graciously sitting there? And if not, we will move on then, and thank you, Ms. Light, and thank you, Susan.
My pleasure, and thank you.
Move on then to 8 items to be approved by ELUC. We have the recreation and entertainment license Maria Guadalupe Flores Rogas, doing business as El Dorado Corporation for Mexican Dancing at the Champaign County Fair Association Fairgrounds, 1302 North Kohler Avenue, Urbana, Illinois, June 25th through June 26th, 2016. Moved by Mr. Schrader, seconded by Ms. Berkson. Mr. Weibel.
Mr. Hall, has this event occurred before? Or is this a new one?
It occurred last year, but it had the rodeo along with it. This is just the dancing.
Did you attend last year?
No, I missed last year.
Well,
Probably will miss this year.
Well, I would like to go to it, but I won't be around, unfortunately. So I was hoping you'd go instead of me, let me know how it is. It looks like it'd be fun.
Any other questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you. Now then to 9, items to be recommended to the county board. Start off with A, proposed minor amendments to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan. And Ms. Monty.
This is coming back after a 30-day review period. I did receive comments from a hydrologist or I'm going to mutilate that word right now. Hydro and geology together, that word. And he informed me and requested that any reference to the sole source aquifer over the Mahomet aquifer also include the word system, only because he's concerned that the sole source aquifer really does cover all of the shallower aquifers above the Mahomet aquifer as well. And that's consistent with the US EPA definition. So now I made those changes in my descriptive text and share that information for you to also understand.
Okay, I guess maybe technically we should have a motion before we discuss it. So is there, moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Ms. Berkson. Okay, thank you. Now any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes unanimously. Move on then to B, Annual Facility Inspection Report for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, MPDES, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4, Stormwater Discharge Permit with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, IEPA, for the period of April 1st, 2015 through March 31st, 2016. And is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Weibel, seconded by Ms. Berkson. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I had this, this was at your chair tonight. Now, what you have before you is not a complete annual report. Tables 5 through 8, I'm still updating, and attachment A changes to BMPs. I'm still updating that. We do need to get this to the county board this month, and I can make those changes in the next few days. It seems like I hardly get a half an hour to work on this before some interruption comes up, so it's been slow going, but you'll have an updated version at the county board, and, you know, probably, I don't know if you want to put this on the consent agenda or not, but there are some changes that still need made to this material in front of you.
Ms. Petrie?
Since there will be some changes, maybe what we could do is vote to move it forward for approval, and then those changes can be discussed at the county board meeting.
So in other words, keep it off the consent?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what John was, and I personally would be fine with that, is if that sounds good to maybe make that, I don't know if it needs to truly be amended into the motion or just know that that's what the motion is intended to do, if that's what we did, if. Yeah, that's true too, so. That's very true, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep. So I guess that's what we'll figure on doing if we vote to pass it on. So if there's any other questions or comments, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, thank you, and Mr. Hall.
And I realize you just got this material tonight, so if you have any questions between now and the county board, please call.
And we will just keep that off and make it known at the full board meeting then. And we can discuss it farther then if so desired. Okay, other business. I have nothing. Is there anything from any of the other members? Chair's report, I have nothing. Designation of items to be placed on consent agenda would be 9A. And other than that, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Ms. Berkson. Seconded by Ms. Petrie. All in favor, aye? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.
It took you